So surreal.
Well, it looks like we might be about ready to go, so let's go ahead and call a meeting to order. And would you please join me for a flag salute? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good.
For how many months have they been in the center of the room instead of the corner? Oh, okay.
Please be seated. Well, thank everyone for being here this evening. The roll staff is here. Council's all here. We can go ahead with any announcements, which are any additions to the agenda from anyone. Hearing none, are there any declarations of ex-parte contact, conflicts of interest, bias?
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. I was at the City Council meeting when you guys last had the parking issue that's coming up. Yeah, the first public hearing. So I do have the information in my brain from that.
Okay. Okay. Councilor?
Mr. Mayor, I also have some declarations to go ahead and make. Regarding Condition U, I have been to the neighborhood several times prior to assuming office. When campaigning in this neighborhood, I can recall at least one resident discussing displeasure at the no parking on one side of the street being enforced. I don't recall his name because I'm not good with names. I have emailed city staff to share questions I plan to ask during this hearing. I received a partial reply from the city manager on items he could answer and thanked him for his quick response. On the 27th of December, I had a meeting with the city planner where we made mere mention of the issue. And then for our unfinished business with the land use decision, on the 7th, a citizen mentioned that she disagreed with the mayor on the viability of the site to accommodate an apartment building. That is all.
Can I make one more addition? I
Yes.
also was campaigning in that neighborhood, and there was a neighbor that did mention it, but I just told them to come down to the meetings.
Okay.
And we stopped the conversation there.
And I also need to declare that I've been to that neighborhood several times and was campaigning with Paige and talked to the same neighbor, but again, encouraged them to come to the meeting and talk to the city council about it.
Okay. This end of the table, having no other conflicts, will be declared pure as the driven snow, and we shall go on. Presentations, comments from the public. Ms. Stratton. Judy?
Yes, my name is Judy Stratton.
Judy,
Do
over.
I come up here?
No, over there, please.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Just tell us again who you are and where you live, please.
Okay, my name is Judy Stratton, and I live at 1189 East Burnett Street here in Stayton. Been here for almost 19 years, and I'm a piano teacher that full-time. I teach 5 days a week. I have almost 40 students. I've had some really difficult times with the driving down my street, and I've bugged our police department to the point where they're probably sick of listening to my voice and seeing my face, but my concern is on East Burnett. It narrows 15 feet too narrow is the way our tract was put together. And I understood there had to be a variance in order to have built the track in the late 90s. The residents at the end of East Burnett, far end, are the offenders. I, in fact, have identified numerous vehicles, and I, in fact, have a piano parent who was stepping out of her van. I teach 6 of her children. And she was stepping out of the van and was almost struck down by a car. She had to fall back up against her van. I've stood out there and made an absolute spectacle of myself trying to get people to slow down. We've had 2 mailboxes taken out. And we have joggers, we have children. I've had piano parents say, don't cross Judy's street. Don't walk across her street or in her street. I've had piano students at the piano looking out my window. I have an eagle's nest spot right there. And they'll go, whoa, and cars just, vroom. They apparently don't know that 25 is the magic number in a residential situation. So, and I realize our police, they can only be so many places at once, and they've been pretty much at my beckoning call till they got tired of dealing with me. And so I've approached Jordan on the issue, and I have given her fair warning about when they do cut through Virginia over there, she's going to be faced with the same thing, because that's a straight, long street. And my request is to consider speed bumps. It is a minor expense on all of our parts when you take into consideration children. All we need is one horrible accident. So it's serious. It's been going on for years and years and years. So I'm asking your help in this before something really, really bad happens. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Judy. Chief, do you have any thoughts on speed bumps? Do you have any thoughts on speed bumps, effectiveness, use?
Yeah. Typically, historically, speed bumps are usually not a good option for something like this. Usually, speed bumps end up causing more issues. Kids will use them as to see how fast they can go over them and bounce the car, or they'll back up to them and spin their tires off on them, and they usually make it difficult for ambulance services for transporting the patients and things like that. There are other things that we can look at doing, and we can look at, we'll look at the issue down there on Burnett. We've had officers over the past down there recording data by going out there and standing out there and checking for speed and things like that. When we find out if it's a particular person that's causing it, we've gone and addressed that issue down there. Now that she says that it sounds like it's maybe coming back again, and we'll look at it again, and so go down there and see if we can see what time the issue is happening, or if there's an issue at all, and see what's happening with it. So.
Okay, good. So something will be done, Ms. Stratton. You will have a quieter street eventually.
Truly, I hope so.
Okay, thank you again. Anyone else need to say something during this period of comments from the public? No? Okay, consent agenda for January 7th, 2019. What would you folks like to do with it?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move we accept the consent agenda as written.
I second.
Is there a second, please?
I second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Everyone's had a chance to look at it. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we'll declare the consent agenda passed. There we go. And the next thing is, with the consent and encouragement of the council, I'd like to appoint Richard Lewis to the Planning Commission.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I second.
And another second? Okay. Mr. Lewis is here this evening. He's a regular guest at our wonderful meetings, and he'll be an asset on the Planning Commission. Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. Again, would all in favor please say aye?
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we'll declare the motion passed 5-0, and we will go to a public hearing. Speak into the mic, Henry. Condition of approval U regarding parking restrictions in the Village Creek subdivision. And I have to read this. Bear with me, please. I wish we had this on tape and we could just play it, but not enough technology. Good evening. My name is Hank Porter. As mayor, I'll be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of land use file number 20-10/18. This case was initiated by the City Council to consider whether to modify a condition of approval placed on the original application for subdivision in 2001. The condition of approval in question requires that on-street parking be permitted on only one side of the street for the streets within the Village Creek subdivision. The City Council had a hearing in mid-November, and following that hearing postponed a decision in order to consult with legal counsel and to provide an opportunity to the public to provide alternate strategies. The hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires a statement be made to those in attendance that covers certain matters relative to this case. That statement, with all the information required to be presented under Oregon Revised Statute number 197.763 bracket 5, is printed and available at the back counter. If you have not yet received one of these forms, you should go get one and review it prior to presenting your testimony. If anyone has any questions regarding anything on the statement or objects to it not being read out loud, please raise those questions when it comes your turn to speak during the hearing. Also at the back counter is the agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing, the City Council's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I'd ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was sent in this case. Okay, I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body?
Just the ones that
Just the ones that have been...
Yeah, that I already said before.
Okay. Those have all been stated. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. And as a participant in the hearing, the city is required to notify you of the final results of the process. We are now ready for the staff introduction. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. The issue before you tonight is a public hearing on whether to modify a condition of approval that was imposed upon the Village Creek subdivision by the City Council back in 2001 when the subdivision was originally approved by the city. This is an unusual application as far as quasi-judicial applications before the City Council, in that there is no applicant before you tonight. This issue was initiated by the previous City Council back in September or October when a number of residents came to a City Council meeting and raised the issue. So it is a bit unusual in that it was something initiated by the council and there is no application. But it is one in which you will be required to make findings as to whether the city's criteria for subdivisions are met and whether there's any justification to allow you to change the condition of approval that was imposed back in 2001. The background is that sometime in the late 1990s, when the Santiam Station development, which includes the area that is now the Arco and the Dairy Queen, the the commercial lots where the State Farm office and the daycare center, the liquor store is, as well as all the way down to Stayton Pharmacy. And the original Santiam Station subdivision included what was at that time Lot 12, that was designated at that time as a mobile home park. And the developer installed the utilities and built the streets, and then decided that for whatever reasons the market changed or whatever, and instead of a mobile home park, came back to the city in 2001 after the streets were built and the utilities installed, and said that they'd like to have a platted subdivision with single-family homes, site-built homes. And it was at that time that the City Council approved the subdivision with a long list of conditions of approval, one of which was that on all of the streets in the subdivision, parking be permitted on one side only. And according to the City Council's decision back in 2001, the reason for that was that the streets were developed with only a 50-foot wide street right-of-way instead of a 60-foot right-of-way, and with only 28 feet of pavement between the curbs instead of the standard 34 feet of pavement. Later that year, that original decision with that condition of approval was issued in June of 2001. And actually, in addition to the restriction on parking, required that there be property line sidewalks with a 3-foot wide, what the council at that time called parkway, a landscape strip between sidewalk and curb. Several months later, the developer came back to the City Council, proposed some amendments to the conditions of approval, including Condition U. And at that time, the City Council amended Condition U to have the sidewalks be curbside sidewalks, so no landscape strip, but maintained the requirement that parking be permitted on one side of the street only. As I understand it, however, the city, in making the final inspections and improvements of the subdivision, apparently did not require the developer to install no parking signs, and the city did not install no parking signs until in 2014, when city staff received complaints from neighbors in the neighborhood about congested parking on Hobson Street. At that time, the staff discovered the documents from 2001, that there was the condition of approval for parking on only one side of the street. And at that time, the Public Works Department installed no parking signs on one side of Hobson Street and Greer Street. In your packet is a copy of a letter that went out to the property owners at that time on those two streets, explaining that the signs were going to be posted. This past year, in August or September, is when a resident came to the City Council meeting and raised the issue. The previous City Council then received a staff report on the situation, and at that time decided to reconsider Condition U. Notice went out to all of the owners of property in the subdivision, as well as owners of all property within 300 feet of the subdivision, as our standard procedure for land use hearings. And notice went out to all of the other units of government and utility agencies that we always send notice out. In your packet is the communications we received back in November from the Stayton Fire District and from the police chief with their recommendations. The fire department, and you also have photos that were taken when the fire department was out there. They took a couple of vehicles and their ladder truck, and you can see the conditions if you had cars parked on both sides of the street, how tight it is in order to set up the outriggers for their fire truck. So both the fire chief and the police chief have recommended to the city council that you not allow parking on both sides of the street. And as was noted earlier, at the close of the November hearing, the previous city council delayed making a decision so that we could consult with the city attorney. Following that consultation, the recommendation from staff remains that you do not change the condition of approval. Finally, it should be noted that there are provisions in our code today that allow rights-of-way of 50 feet in certain subdivisions, but in doing so, the code does require, among other things, that on-street parking is restricted to only one side of the street. So again, the recommendation from staff is that whereas the streets have only 28 feet of pavement, there's not adequate width to have vehicles parked on both sides of the street. We recommend maintaining the restriction and further recommend that no parking signs be posted on the other two streets where they were not posted back in 2014. So and you've got options presented to you in the staff report and a draft order with findings and conclusions in it that carries out the recommendation from staff. With that, I'm available to answer any questions when the time comes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fleischman. Questions from the council? Ta-da.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
So I have a question about if there is any, like when we make this decision, is there anything that we can do in the event that it is restricted to one side that we can do to alleviate the parking issues? I know that was talked about in a previous council meeting, like an extra parking area or something possibly thrown out there. Is there anything that we can do beyond just taking away parking, like to help them? Hypothetically, if they're having it taken away.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent it would help. There are neighboring streets that are built to full size where there aren't as many parking restrictions, you know, in sort of the commercial area to the west of here. Although I believe that 3rd Avenue is also signed for no parking in front of the daycare center and where the seasonal produce stand was a few years ago. There aren't any, you know, there's the parking area at Santiam Park where I don't think there's any restrictions on overnight parking or anything like that. There's a 4 or 5 space parking lot there, but there is no additional land in the neighborhood. There are no vacant lots that would be available to turn into a parking area.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Dan, as we discussed, well, as I sent you an email about this, there are a couple of alternatives mentioned. Could we go over your analysis of each of them and the feasibility of them? Would you like me to name them?
Yeah, why don't we go
Sure.
through them one by one, and I may get some assistance from other staff in answering those.
Alternative back and forth on zones of parking and no parking on each side of the street. So checkerboard pattern type deal. You want to talk about the feasibility of that?
That could be done. I mean, for instance, just to randomly select Hobson Street, it could be that it's no parking on the south side of the street for the east half and on the north side for the west half. That would be just as feasible as having no parking on the south side the whole length of the street. That's just a matter of Public Works Department choosing what side of the street to put signs on.
Right. Could you discuss the pitfalls to that alternative?
I'm not quite sure I necessarily see that alternative would have any pitfalls other than if neighbors don't want no parking on their side, you know, it's a matter of you're upsetting person A instead of person B.
Okay. Switch no parking signs back and forth every 6 months or every year or any other time frame.
To me, that sounds like an excessive use of staff time involved in actually switching the signs. It would mean the neighbors got to figure out, okay, you know, well, you know, hopefully if the signs are up, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out, but it just leads to, well, how do we remember, oh, it's June, we need to go up to Hobson Street and change the no parking signs, as opposed to just saying this, you know, the south side of the street's no parking and the north side is you can park on.
That would, if I may add to that.
Please.
I know we have contractors in the audience, but I'm guessing that it cost in the neighborhood about $150 a sign every time we wanted to do that. And that'd just be an ongoing.
Do you have an estimate of how many signs are going to be posted in this neighborhood?
No, I don't. I haven't.
And I apologize for not giving you time to prepare for that question.
I haven't sit down and looked at it, actually. Normally, you probably have them in every 150 feet or so, every three lots, maybe 4 lots.
Right. So the third alternative was sign both sides with allowed and prohibited times for parking. Would you discuss that?
Again, I see that as an administrative and additional workload administratively and enforcement-wise. Again, if it's every other day or in the morning you can park on this side, in the afternoon you can park on that side for vehicles that don't get moved. But once every couple days, then you got to remember to go out and move your car. I mean, it just we're talking about a street that's only 28 feet wide from curb to curb. The difference between walking out your front door, going to the driver's side of a car that's parked on your side of the street, and going to the driver's side of a car that's parked across the street is going to be no more than 20 feet.
Okay. One more question, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. How many residents are estimated to be impacted in the development by the no parking on one side of the street?
There are 68 lots in the subdivision.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
Dan, do you know what, I want to make sure I get this right. I think it's Hobson. The east end of Hobson and dead ends, correct?
Yes.
Do you know what the transportation master plan calls for that street going in the future?
There is no extension of that street shown in the future streets plan in the adopted transportation system.
Who owns that property at the end of that dead end, do we know?
I believe that property is owned by the Village at Sylvan Springs Homeowners Association.
Okay.
Isn't that wetland though?
Yes, it is. It is wetland. It is wetland and
sure, but their
stormwater management area.
Sure. But my thought is there enough room there to have that a cul-de-sac type thing for additional parking for that neighborhood? And if there is, how do we get about that?
Right.
How do we make that happen?
On one hand, yes, there is room. On the other hand, it is all wetland, and it is wetland that was designated as the stormwater management area for the Sylvan Springs. So it would mean probably quite a bit of engineering and environmental consulting and permit approvals from DEQ or DSL, Division of State Lands.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Dan, so are you saying that it would be possible, but it would be difficult?
It would,
Really difficult.
engineering-wise, it is probably possible. Whether it's feasible or not, whether it's practical, I can't begin to guess, but it would be, it would involve amendments to the Sylvan Springs subdivision plat, because that land was dedicated as a tract to the homeowners association. It would involve engineering to make sure their stormwater management plan still works if you're filling in land that may be shown as wetlands and flooded during peak storm events. And it would involve significant environmental permitting for filling wetlands.
I might add it.
And probably would not be permitted under our code, now that I think about it, because they're probably designated as high-value or locally significant wetlands, and our code does not permit filling of locally significant wetlands.
I'm not sure Division of State Lands would approve it, to be quite honest, since it's already designated as a wetland. They already went through the delineation and the approval from the Division of State Lands for Sylvan Springs. They may, but they've been getting more and more stringent as the years go by. My take is they would probably not approve it.
Well, I didn't consider the previous flooding we had over there either, back in the day. Forgot about that.
96.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions from the council? Anything? Let's go then to...
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
What about, sorry, the no parking side of the street, could we possibly make it like a 15-minute kind of parking? I think one of the concerns is that in front of people's houses, if they are trying to unload or load things and they're on the street for whatever reason, that they might need to access their side of the street. Is that a possibility?
So,
I guess I would turn to you, Rich, for that.
It's an enforcement issue.
You could do that. Enforcement could become very difficult in doing that, determining how long somebody's there. Was this car 15 minutes or was it there for 3 hours and the person says it was there for 15 minutes. That can be a difficult, but yes, it is feasible to do that.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
One more question, Dan. In 2014, did the council direct you to put the signs up, the no parking signs? Or the staff just did it on their own after discovering the condition of approval?
The staff did that on our own after discovering the condition of approval.
So why do we need to be the council to direct you to additional no parking signs on the streets that doesn't have it?
You do not.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
Dan, have we thought about, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad idea, have we discussed at all, or have you thought about, there's some residential areas that will do like parking permits or whatever, so that you don't have just a bunch of guests coming and constantly taking the parking spots on streets. There's a lot of different communities that will do like a residential parking permit area.
In my experience, those are in residential neighborhoods where there is, shall we say, pressure or there's demand for on-street parking from people who do not live in that neighborhood. For instance, I live in a college town, and the residential neighborhoods surrounding the campus are all residential parking only, and you go get a sticker on your windshield from City Hall to show that you live in that neighborhood. Stayton has something similar near Regis High School because of the demand for parking from visitors to the school grounds for, I think it's primarily for when there's athletic games and Little League and things going on there. So we already have that type of thing in place. But my understanding here is that the on-street parking in this residential neighborhood is not from non-residents of the neighborhood. It's not like people visiting the liquor store are parking out on Hobson Street.
Yeah, but it could possibly, I mean, potentially reduce the amount of people that are allowed per house to park in that area, and then any additional cars would have to go find another area to park. Like if you have like 5 cars in one single family residence, then you have your driveway and like 1 or 2 residential parking permits. I mean, it's just an idea. I don't know that it's a good one, but
right,
I'm just
that could
wondering.
be an option that would help relieve the demand for parking, but it does not deal with the issue of should cars be parked only on one side of the street because the street is narrow.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Chief, I think I asked you last time, what's the total number of citations issued for this at that neighborhood? Let's say in the last couple years.
So since 2014, when the signs were put in place, there were 7 parking violations that were issued. I don't know how many verbal warnings were given.
So 7 citations in 5 years.
Yep.
1 a year. Okay. 1 point. Okay. Audience has heard us thrash around in this and hopefully looking for some solutions. But let's give the public a chance to weigh in on this. So, public testimony. If you need to say something, get up to the mic. Tell us who you are and where you live, and go ahead on.
My name is Justin Oganaga. I live at 18433 Old Mahama Road, Stayton, Oregon. Listening to you guys talk about end of the road, that first lot is owned by Yardborough Jack. He lives in Kaiser, P.O. Box 2756. He bought it back in 2008, and the next property next to that, closest to the road, is owned by a Gerd Rald out of Carson City, Nevada. So I don't know if they haven't developed because it is protected land, but it is independently owned.
Okay.
All right. That is all.
Thank you. Somebody else. There we go.
My name is Aaron Fusen. I live at 750 Hobson. So I heard you guys talk about enforcement and hard to enforce 15-minute no parkings. I got a parking ticket and I didn't even park the car there. I was on the roof of my home. My wife was the one that parked the car there, and yet they still give me a ticket. That's what initiated all this stuff. 14 years after I purchased my house, then we want to stick no parking signs up. I don't think it's fair to the public that, you know, after 14 years we get to stake a claim here, you know. We have 30 other streets here in Stayton that are 28 to 30 feet wide without signs. So I don't see that being an issue. And I don't know what we're gonna do with a ladder truck down there. You know, we took pictures of the fire department took pictures and all that stuff. And we don't need a ladder truck. We're a residential area. We don't have 4-story buildings down there, so.
Mr. Fusen, what to do?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well,
I suggested maybe 2-hour parking. Evidently.
Hard to enforce. Okay.
Hard to enforce, or don't want to, or rather give tickets out to people that didn't even do the crime, I guess.
Okay.
So.
Okay, something else. What else can we do?
Remove them.
Okay.
14 years after, I mean, come on. I'm sorry, but the city should have dealt with that in the beginning.
Okay.
That's what we pay you guys for. I mean, not each and every one of us, but, you know.
That's certainly an option. It's just not recommended, but it's an option. you've had a chance to think about all the possibilities since we started this. Anything else that...
Me personally, I want them removed. I don't think we need them. We haven't had an issue. I think, me personally, I think it's a way to get revenue into the city, and I think it's wrong. You know, after this long of a period of not having them and not having issues and that sort of thing, you know, now we're having this conversation because some folks don't like it.
Okay. Good. Thank you for now. You may have to get back up there again, but somebody else. I really kind of like the idea of switching signs on a yearly basis or something, but I thought that would be considered so ridiculous that it wouldn't be considered at all. But the idea of playing the fairness principle there of everyone gets advantaged and or disadvantaged, it would be expensive unless you just put poles on both sides of the streets and just sign January 1st, come over. But that's probably too easy. I need to think complex. Go ahead, please.
Okay, my name's Bob Purvis. I live at 531 Hobson. This thing of putting all the cars on one side, the fire hydrants are staggered on both sides of the road. If you put all the cars in front of there, they're not going to be able to get to the fire hydrants anyway. So I'm in favor of just removing the signs. You can go down there right now. There's people parked on both sides of the road anyway. They're not obeying the signs anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that's another consideration then, isn't it? Yeah. Chief, are your officers noticing,
Mr. Mayor.
let's say, a disregard for the signs?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I think from questions from the council, we can do that. We're public testimony.
That's right.
Yeah, so let's
We're calling on everyone here, but you're right. Go ahead. Another public person, please.
My name is Tammy Deloach, and I live at 440 Hobson. And I just am curious to what kind of problems we had prior when we were able to park on both sides of the road. Because, I mean, I've lived there for, I think it's almost 5 years now. And, I mean, it's not like we have constant people on both sides of the road parking. I mean, we have friends come over and they'll park in front of the house. But now we're having to find other avenues for people to come and visit. Or park in my yard. So I'm just kind of curious to what was it like before? Did we have a lot of problems with ambulance and fire trucks coming down our road? Or, you know, just kind of a question.
Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Can we, or do we need to wait till the public comment is done?
Yeah, I think there'd be questions from the council at this point, the public's to testify. If you
even though they're asking questions of, okay. Someone else.
I'm Janice Purvis, and I live at 531 Hobson Street. And when this first came up, we filled out petitions. If we didn't fill out this petition saying that we didn't want the 2-hour, didn't want the parking signs. Mm-hmm. And do you still have those, and do they carry any weight?
I don't know, ma'am. I don't know if we can get.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that if.
Go ahead. I really don't.
I'll answer it when it comes to comments from the council.
We've got to wait till comments from the council, but we'll try to come back to that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody else. Are there more residents of the area out there? Okay, because I expect to see Mr. Fusen at these hearings. We if we're going to talk about that area, he's going to be here, and that's fine. But there should be other people from the area that might have something to say about it. If not, we should go back to questions from the council. Go ahead, Brian.
Mr. Mayor, as far as the petition goes, I think that's how it progressed to this point. The previous council last year had those petitions presented to them, and that was what triggered the discussion to have this discussion and have this hearing. So yes, they were received, and yes, that's how we got to this point.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question for Keith. Is the city willing to take any type of responsibility for the past decisions that council and city staff may have made in this subdivision, and maybe find some out-of-the-box solution to alleviate this parking issue in a more creative way? And I mean, even if it takes money being allocated from somewhere, I'm just wondering, like, this was a decision a long time ago, and no one is still here, I don't think, that made the decision in 2001.
I mean, the issue is that the staff became aware of a condition regarding an issue back in what, 2014. It was brought to our attention, and we moved to do that. In terms of solutions, we've talked about the solutions that have sort of been, presented, and there's just a limitation on what can be done with the space that's down there, and what can happen. And the honest answer is we're not here if when this subdivision was initially built, if the signs were put up and the conditions were initially enforced. That's where this problem is really initiating from. But in terms of this expectation of out-of-the-box solutions, we've had this now for several months. We've talked about, I think it's highlighted some of the ideas of the checkerboarding, of the alternating sides, of the alternating days, and the challenges that all of those have. Ultimately, if you're asking where we are at from a staff's point of view, it's a case of following the recommendation of the police, the fire department, and city staff, and putting up the condition as was initially approved, or just not doing that and understanding what the consequences of that could be if there was some tragedy down there, or a fire that happened and equipment was unable to reach it. In terms of looking for other parking spaces or other parking options, there's just not going to be anything that's realistically going to be close beyond the options that we've had. Staff has talked about it. I know people out there have had the opportunity as well, but this is sort of where we're at. And unfortunately, we are with what we have in front of us and what the conditions are in terms of the land and the properties and the infrastructure.
I want to clarify that I meant that a designed mobile home park was turned into a residential area, not the fact that there were not signs placed. Point of clarification.
I think that's one of the issues down there was and Dan talked about it in his staff report, that the infrastructure was initially designed for a mobile home park, and it was changed to single-family home, and the city didn't require the infrastructure to be upgraded to the new use. And that's why this road is a little more unique than other roads in the community.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, David.
Chief, I think you'd probably be the most appropriate one to ask this question. And again, I apologize for not giving you in advance. The type of fire engine that would not fit through the vehicles displayed in the photo that's in our packets here, would its primary use be to put out a residential fire in that type of neighborhood?
Not speaking from the fire department.
Right. Just emergency services.
I do know from emergency services and from I had a previous career in firefighting, and those types of fire, the large ladder trucks are used on residential fires as well. One for their gear, but then also for protecting the other homes around them. They'll stick the ladder way up and use them to put water on the houses to the sides of them to keep them from igniting as well when there is a large house fire in those areas. So it's not just because it's a a high-rise building.
Okay, and then putting your chief hat on, how often is that piece of equipment deployed in residential fires in Stayton, for example? Do you have any idea?
I wouldn't be able to answer that.
And then the other engines, they can make it through, correct?
They would be able to drive down the street, yes. But as far as getting their gear out, I wouldn't be able to answer that. That'd be an answer you'd have to ask them on.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Other questions?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
So let's say, hypothetically, we took out the signs, and there was an incident down there, a fire, someone got hurt or even died in an accident because we weren't able to get emergency vehicles down there. Who is responsible for that? Where does that fall back on? Or who does that fall back on if someone, you know, gets hurt or your house burns down because we can't get there?
The recommendation from staff is basing on the public safety issue in terms of the liability that we would assume knowing about an issue. And it's not a case of what are the odds it could happen, it's a case of it does happen, what would the liability be for the city? And that's where the recommendation comes from, to make sure that public safety needs and requirements are met. And that's where the recommendation from the fire chief is a basis for our recommendation as well.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Last question for me. On 9th Street and 15th in my neighborhood, there are signs that are folded over, and those signs are flooding signs that are used seasonally. So the sign's been put up, and when the need arises, they flip the sign over. Maybe something of that nature would work. I don't know.
No, I don't either. Anything else?
Oh, I do. I have another question. It was brought up in public comment about that the fire hydrants are staggered, but there is like no parking in front of a fire hydrant, correct?
Correct.
So that you would be able, if there was parking on that side of the street, you should, in theory, be able to get a vehicle there. Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
Sorry. Am I understanding correctly that the trucks actually will fit through, it's just getting the equipment out that's the issue? If they're parked on both sides?
My understanding from the pictures is that the equipment has
stanchions.
Yeah, extensions.
I understand that, but the truck can drive through. I have a follow-up question after that, like just knowing that portion.
There is space if cars are parked on both sides for the truck to drive through.
Okay.
The space. The issue is.
And is there any way that we can look into how close a fire truck like needs to be to each house, where maybe there could be no parking instead of like no parking on both sides, that it's parking all on one side, and then every so many feet there's this many feet that's the length of a fire truck? I don't know. I'm just trying to think, can we look into this more for more creative options for this, where they could get all of their gear open and still safely reach every house in that neighborhood, but not taking away all parking on both sides completely?
Well, I mean, I think to expand on the checkerboard idea, I mean, I know there was conversations with some of staff of just going back and forth. The concern I have with something like that is, what we're trying to avoid here, we're trying to make people upset, right? And if we say, okay, we're going to pick north and south and go back and forth, then it's giving us more arbitrary decisions on who gets parking and who doesn't, right? And so that would actually probably create more difficulty, because now we're being more capricious in who we're picking, right? Because wait a minute, my side of the street has some parking and doesn't, and you pick my house to have no parking. That would be the concern I would have with the checkerboarding back and forth. Is we're going to make half the people mad no matter what, but the more discretion we have, the more frustration I could see, where people would say, wait a minute, I have an option, I want the option in front of me, I don't care about my neighbor. You see, I'm just trying to be blunt as I can in front of everybody of why I'd be concerned about that kind of action. In terms of what Dan was talking about and flipping it on the further side, that's a possibility, but again, where that point is could be a point of contention with the neighborhood, who would say,
I think the issue is like the amount of parking, and giving like even a few spots extra. If you were to do it in like some type of a calculation of however many feet the fire department says that they need from a fire hydrant that's already there, so that then it would just be like a math equation of, and we're not picking in front of anybody, you're actually going off of a number of feet that there's like an analysis about it of what you would need. It would take more time, but it feels like this is kind of a big mistake that happened a long time ago, when it was, the whole area was planned, and now it may just need more time to fix.
Well, it really even gets better than that. The streets were put in, and then the request was made to change the use of the area. Stuff was all on the ground. And then we decided to put houses on it. A lot of mistakes made there. Okay.
Yeah, if the option was to explore more, I am not familiar with anything that you described. Lance, are you familiar with anything that's been done of that nature?
No, it's just turning movements. You know, you're going to have to project out on a plan how the fire truck's supposed to turn in so many houses, and what you're asking for is very dynamic. I'm sure it can be done. It's going to take probably a consultant to do it for us, to figure that out, to maybe save a couple spots here and there.
Is it easier to do that, or like, is it easier to do like working with the DEQ or whatever it is for the wetlands? I mean, I don't know what's easier, like, to even explore.
That conversation with DSL, we could do in a couple days, I believe, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to go out and have to buy more wetlands somewhere else.
Litigation.
I feel like there's a lot of no, and I'm wanting to hear, like, can we look into something beyond this?
I guess my response is we've spent a lot of time. I'm not sure what that would be at this point. And you're right. I mean, this is a bad situation from a long time ago, but this is, I mean, I feel like we've, as a staff, beat this subject to death, and believe me, I'm fully aware of the challenges and the difficulties, and there was a lot of issues in the past that could have prevented us from sitting here right now, but I don't know how to go back and fix that infrastructure, and the way the infrastructure is, it's not an easy fix.
We're certainly close to beating it to death here tonight.
I do have.
Just
one more thing. I made a note. One of the neighbors asked what kind of problems were there before the signs were put up. Can anybody?
Yeah. I guess I would. My response would be not to focus on what kind of problems there is. It's the liability and the problems that could be going forward. Now that we're aware of the problem.
Gotcha.
Okay. Any more questions? Let's go to a staff summary then. Mr. Fleischman?
You've got a situation where in the past the city allowed substandard development, to use a blunt term, I guess, allowed streets to be built that did not meet our standards, and in doing so imposed a condition in order to address safety. You've got in your packets the recommendation from the fire chief, who says, in conclusion, it is in the best interest of public safety to limit skinny street parking to one side of the street. I think if he were here today and you were asking him the types of questions that the council asked of this staff, from my being out there the day they were there with their equipment, his answer would be that the best interest of public safety is to limit parking to one side of the street. The question was asked by one of the members of the public in their testimony about the impact of the petitions that were submitted to the council back in the fall. As Councilor Quigley said, those petitions were submitted to the council before the council decided to schedule a public hearing and essentially initiate the case, the land use case, so they are not part of the record of this proceeding. But even if they were, your decision when you sit as a quasi-judicial body is to look at the facts and the information and the testimony that is presenting that information to you, and to judge whether the criteria for approval, the standards that are in our code, are met or not. It is not a public opinion poll. It is not a popularity contest. It is not what decision will make the most people happy or angry. It is, are the standards of approval met or not? In this case, the staff has identified approval criteria that require streets to be in a location and have a right-of-way and travel-way width and according to the city's plans and standards, as well as the design standards for subdivisions and partitionings that require streets to meet the public works standards for that have been adopted. And we have a case where back in 2001 the council allowed streets to not meet those standards, but with a condition of approval that parking be on only one side. So in order to change that condition of approval, you will need to identify the conditions that are in place that would allow you to justify changing the condition of approval and come to conclusions that are different than your predecessors back in 2001. So with that, you've got a draft order in front of you, which is the recommendation of staff. That recommendation is based partly on recommendation from the review agencies that we bring into our land use process. You've got the option to modify that, but the recommendation from staff is to adopt the draft order of denial as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Let's go ahead and close the hearing and go to council deliberation. What would you folks like to do? We've got...
I am not obviously happy with the fact that there isn't enough parking down there. But the one word that keeps coming to my brain is safety. And I feel like that might trump the parking spaces, but I feel like we owe them more in brainstorming. I know that we've said that we've talked it over, but I hope that we revisit the parking issue and continue to brainstorm, because it sounds like some of the things that we came up with in the last 2 hearings now are things that hadn't maybe been considered before from the city. So if you get more brains together, you can come up with more ideas. I do have a motion when people are done deliberating, though.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. Questions, thoughts, deliberations? I'll go ahead and try a motion.
All right.
Ms. Hook.
I would like to move that the City Council order that the condition U from land use file number 21-10/01 shall remain unmodified, and the Public Works Department shall post no parking signs. And this is where I'm going to amend it to say an appropriate amount of feet that a standard parking space would be, where every 2 parking spaces it alternate to the other side of of the road.
Okay, so.
On which streets?
On all of those streets, yeah.
Can you say that one more time?
I'll say that the Public Works Department shall post no parking signs that are the appropriate amount of feet that a standard parking space would be for 2 parking spaces, and it would alternate to the other side of the road after those 2 parking spaces alternate back and forth.
So that's a new, okay. And you've got that in the form of a motion?
I think I said I move.
Okay.
Can I ask questions about that?
We need probably need a second.
Oh.
We're still deliberating. All right, let's do that. Let's just not worry about.
Well, but I
was
have
a motion.
Yeah, so if there's no second, then it dies. So.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just deliberate. Go ahead.
No, you gotta take.
We
it
gotta
back.
call for a second.
Yeah,
To
there has
see
to
if
be a
there's a second before.
There hasn't been. So motion dies for lack of a second. Jordan, your thought here.
So is that like the checkerboard option that you're kind of thinking about? That's the.
It's kind of a double checkerboard, right?
Yeah, you got
My
2 parking spaces one side, flip to the other side, 2 parking spaces. Yeah.
We're deliberating. How would you mark that?
Yeah, that's my question.
Just on street, lines on the street?
With, paint.
Paint?
Yeah. Where there's no parking, you paint it red or yellow or whatever they do for no parking.
Okay.
Fire lane, like the fire lane?
I mean, that would kind of be the purpose of it, is that it's a fire lane. I don't know how that works, though, with regulations. I have no idea when you can use that and when you can't.
Trick seems to be tonight, can we get somewhere from here? And I don't know, it just looks the same, it comes up on the same mess all the time. Old mistakes that.
Is it possible to send it back to staff if we are looking for something like this, a suggestion of the checkerboarding? Is it possible to send this back to staff to request another option in that line of thinking that is still meets all the requirements that we need and isn't going to get us sued in the event?
I don't know.
You know, that doesn't land us with the liability. Because my thought about it is, there's people that are living there right now that don't want the signs. However, we know that there's a safety issue there. So let's say in 40 years, you know, a young family moves there and there's a tragedy there. They didn't get the option to say, well, I don't want the signs there. And then they said, well, you knew there was an issue and this could have been avoided, but you still chose to do it because it was an inconvenience for people who lived there earlier. So then we're just passing the buck like we did, like the people 20 years ago are passing the buck on us, and now we're having to make this hard decision for all of you neighbors, which it isn't easy to do at the moment, obviously. So we're trying to make this right, but I don't want to be the person that in 20 or 40 years that someone said, well, this city council could have avoided this tragedy. So taking out the signs, in my opinion, isn't an option at this point. But if the checkerboarding, but then you go back to like what Keith said about, then you're getting arbitrary and subjective. So
I want to hear. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Councilor Quigley, you mentioned discussing sort of having temporary signs moved in and moved out and that type of thing. As far as every 6 months, switching that to the other side of the road, I mean, that seems pretty straightforward.
I was just trying to find an equitable situation to a stuck position.
Yeah. But then how is that going to be? We have to think about the feasibility of that with the staff going in and doing that. And
you can just make it the first of the month every 6 months.
And then enforcement?
That's the part that we're stuck on. We'd have to talk.
About imposing a 15-minute or 2-hour parking limit on one side of the road to mitigate some of this.
There's a fire in that 15 minutes. You got a car that's stuck there. You're in the same spot of liability.
The 6-month thing, how about the neighborhood association changing the signs?
There's no neighborhood association, Mayor.
Can't do that?
No.
There's-
And then the question I have about changing every 6 months is, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, are we still going to be changing it every 6 months?
Yeah.
I mean, the political realities are going to be different then than they are now.
Okay. Agree. All right. Still under deliberation. Somebody want to suggest something?
Are we able to keep the signs and then like have the council workshop a future consideration of what to do? I don't know, like keep them for now because it's a safety issue, but then continue to work on this and find maybe, maybe ask the questions to the fire department, or I don't know. I know we've done workshops before, so I just don't know.
Okay.
I just am not really happy with this.
In other words, maintain status quo for now.
For now, yeah, and with the caveat that we would continue to brainstorm this not on a city council night.
Maybe
Yes,
dig around in this.
As the policymakers, you can decide and take direction any way you would like. I just would like to add the caveat that I think the expectations should be that this has been something we've reviewed and looked at, and it's going to be challenging to find something that I think is going to meet what the goal is, but we can always continue to try if that's what you choose to do.
So at this point, doing nothing is doing something, which is sad to contemplate, but that may be where we are tonight.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
By taking no action, the current situation, the status doesn't change.
No, that's right.
Correct?
Right.
So is there really a need for a motion to retain the current situation?
Well, with this, I guess, this obscure, weird fairness thing, you have to post signs on the 2 streets that don't have them now.
So
that wasn't done at council direction, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So since it's come to the attention that 2 streets haven't had signs, is there any move to put signs up, or we're just waiting for this to happen?
For about 3 years.
Keith, is that a question for you?
Ask that again, Jordan, please.
So since this issue has been brought up and we know that there's 2 signs that haven't been posted, were you just waiting for the council to come to a decision before we put those 2 signs up?
Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Okay.
Didn't want to continue on forward without, when the action could change based off of the decision of the council.
Gotcha.
Okay. So you folks ready for some action on this?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'll offer a motion to retain the condition of approval for parking only on one side of the street for the streets in Village Creek subdivision, and leave it at that.
Okay.
If the city so chooses to install the rest of the signs, that's up to them.
Okay.
So a modified version of option number 1.
Okay. I've got a motion to retain the condition of approval for parking on only one side of this street for the streets in Village Creek subdivision. Okay. And just like that?
Please.
Okay, is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to retain the condition of approval for parking on only one side of the street for the streets in Village Creek subdivision, period. Let's see what happens. Any discussion?
So, Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify the intent of Councilor Quigley's motion with him. as I interpret the motion, we will be modifying the order of approval. If you look at page 4 of the draft, under section 5, which is the order itself.
Hold on, page 5?
Yeah, page 4, section 5, which is the order, currently as drafted contains 2 sentences. One of which says the City Council orders that condition U from Land Use File 21-10/01 shall remain unmodified.
Gotcha.
The second sentence is, the Public Works Department shall post no parking signs on one side of Weldon Street and Whitney Street. So I interpret that the motion that's currently before the council is to modify the draft order to delete the second sentence of that paragraph and to otherwise adopt the order as drafted.
Is that what you wanted?
That was my thought after my statement to you. My question to you was, did the previous council direct to you in 2014 to have this?
And no, they did not.
So that's my motion stands.
Okay.
Okay, so we need to, Dan, we just need to take that second sentence out of Order 5?
Out of the order.
Out of the order, okay.
Is there anywhere else it says something about that in this?
There may be some in the findings. Yeah.
Can I make a clarifying statement on what you're saying? Because I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. So you want to take that statement out because you're saying you don't want the council to direct it, but it's already been established that they need to be there, so the city should already be putting them up? Correct. Is that what you're thinking?
Correct. There was no council direction to put them up last time. It was part of the letter U agreement, conditions of approval. So they don't have to have staff. We don't have to have city direction or council direction to put them up. Correct.
So this doesn't modify condition U, though. So
that is correct.
I'm not modifying condition U.
What I heard Councilor Quigley's motion was to vote to not modify the condition of approval, but also to not direct staff to put signs up on the other 2 streets.
That's correct.
And so
if the city,
I just wanted to clarify that was the motion, and doing so was essentially a motion to modify the draft order as I described.
Okay, sure.
Because I'm the one that's going to be responsible for carrying out your motion. So I want to just confirm that's what we were doing.
I want to read this as I understand it, which seems kind of important to me at least. The City Council orders that condition U from Land Use File number 21-10/01 shall remain unmodified. Period. Dan? Mr. Flashman? Is that?
What?
I think Dan was distracted first.
Did I get that right?
Right. If the motion passes, the draft order will be changed by deleting the second sentence in the actual order section of the order.
Okay, that's fine. I did understand it. You folks ready to vote? Okay, let's go to a decision. Alyssa, would you poll the council, please, on this?
Sure. Counselor Patty?
No.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
No.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
3-2. Okay. We got that one. All right.
So you, Mr. Mayor, you have a closing statement to read at the end of your opening
I have a closing statement to read. Where it is. There it is. The council decisions may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the mailing of the notice of decision in accordance with state law. Okay. Got that one. Let's go to some unfinished business. We're an hour and a half into this meeting. Let's do that. Let's go ahead. Annexation and Comprehensive Plan Amendment Application, Hilliard Ford, Gulf Lane. and those folks are here tonight. Mr. Fleischman, a staff report, please.
Certainly. So the issue that's before you with this item is the second consideration of Ordinance 1028. That ordinance, if enacted tonight, would finalize the annexation of approximately 8 acres of land on Gulf Lane, as well as a portion of the Gulf Lane right-of-way and the Cascade Highway right-of-way into the city limits, and also would change the comprehensive plan designation of the property from residential to commercial, and would assign commercial general zoning to the property. You held a public hearing on this item 2 weeks ago. Following the closure of the public hearing, you deliberated and you passed the first consideration of the ordinance. Under the city charter, if the first consideration of the ordinance is not passed unanimously, then it must come back for a second consideration at a subsequent meeting. And so it is here before you for your consideration. The only changes to Ordinance 1028 from what appeared before you before is the date of enactment at the bottom of the ordinance. The first draft was on January 7th, and this draft says January 22.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Are there some council deliberation on this? We've been through it once. We'll see if, I don't know, Dan, there are no new prevailing arguments.
The record is closed. There are no arguments allowed, whether they prevail or not.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one thing to say. I wanted to clarify that my no vote was because there was no deliberation between when the motion was made and when we voted, and therefore I wasn't able to deliberate between. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll try not to mess that up again. We need some action on this, I guess. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate Paige's explanation. If that's actually what took place, that's a problem in my mind.
What, the deliberation?
That there wasn't any deliberation. I don't recall that, but.
Oh. I thought we talked
Good
that
point.
over pretty well,
Yeah.
but maybe not.
Is that what? Did you?
Okay.
Okay.
What do you folks want?
We'll look at the video.
What do you folks want to do with this tonight? Dan says we need to move to a second consideration of
Do we
a
get to
land
deliberate
use
now?
file, number 19-09/18.
What's that?
We're in council deliberation
Yeah,
on
it says
this.
council deliberation.
I don't think that we can.
There's nothing to deliberate, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that there is
Then why
either,
do,
but if
then why
some-
do we need?
Because that's where our deals.
Well, I know, but if you can't deliberate, then what's the point of voting on it again?
You have to.
Well, because the rules say you have to, if we can't get a...
The agenda item for deliberation is your opportunity to say something that you have to say, but there can't be any new information from the audience or the staff because the record is closed, so it's your opportunity to bat this thing around if you have anything to say. And but really, if we were following rules of procedure, there's really nothing to discuss until there is a motion offered by a council member to take action.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So typically, the way things work is someone makes a motion, there's a second, and then the chair calls for discussion on the motion before there's a vote.
What if you don't like the motion?
That's what we normally do.
Then you vote no.
Okay.
Or it dies for lack of a second, and you never even get there.
Okay. Well, I guess that's where I would rather deliberate before you make a motion.
And that's this opportunity. Okay. That's why there's deliberation on the agenda.
Okay.
I guess I just wanted to clarify what you guys understood is that we have no way to, in these two issues that we're voting on, we don't have a way of stating whether we want them to hook up to the water anyway. Like, I just wanted to clarify that that is true, that that's not what part of this is. That's my understanding, is that that's not included. And that's really what I wanted to ask before we voted, because it didn't sound like that was on the ticket of
As
what we were
Dan's
voting
explained
for.
it a couple, 3 times, it's just about the annexation and a comprehensive map plan amendment.
Yeah.
And
That's-
designated the property as commercial general or something, some designation on it.
When we make a motion, Lance had stated previously that we could have them do a performance bond as an insurance to make sure. But I mean, I know that's a ways out in the process, but is that out of our reach to require that as a condition?
At this point, it probably is.
It's not part of the annexation.
Yeah, it's not part of the.
Okay, so not the annexation, but the.
I think it's part of the site plan.
It's conditions of approval for the actual dealership when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Which we don't see.
We're not there yet tonight, yeah. So.
Okay.
Anything else?
Then I guess the only concern that I know that I voted yes, but still the only concern that I kind of roll around in my head is, how do we make sure that when it comes time, that we make sure that they do hook up to the city services?
Well, and that's the thing, is that's not what we're voting on.
That's down the road.
Yeah, so there's 3 sections to this, but we're only looking at 2. We're looking at the annexation and the comprehensive plan map amendment. Yeah, that. And the 3rd section is the actual, like, dealership site application that has all of that stuff in it. And we don't see, it's my understanding, we don't see that. That goes to the city staff.
Okay.
I think. Correct me if
I think you're close, yeah. So.
If I may.
You may.
Depending on the nature and the details, well, let me back up. The Planning Commission, in their conditions of approval on the site plan review application, required the applicant to enter into a development agreement with the city.
Okay.
Depending on the nature and details of that development agreement, that contract, it very well may be that in the future, staff will bring that development agreement before the city council for approval prior to it being executed.
Okay.
Can I?
No.
Sorry.
Are we ready, Mayor?
It's up to you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion, please. I move to approve the applications of Leo Hillier, land use file number 19-09/18 for annexation and comprehensive plan amendment, and assign commercial general zoning to the property by enacting ordinance number 1028 as presented.
I second.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
And a second. I don't think there's any discussion on this. It's a straight yes or no. Alyssa, would you poll the council, please?
Of course. Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. We get there finally.
And again, Mr. Mayor, because this is the final conclusion of this land use action, you've got you should have a closing statement in front of you.
For this one too?
Yes.
Okay, do it again. Council's decision may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the mailing of the notice of decision in accordance with state law. Boom, thank you. Okay, what's next? New business, Stayton Community Trail System.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to do something sort of unique. We have our staff report, and I will direct members of the governing body and members of the public to review the staff report, and we're going to take a little bit of time and touch on doing a presentation about the trails. We've had some some concerned citizens come about a recent trail project. So what staff wanted to do was touch upon the background, the current situation, and then also what's happening with the Rotary Trail. And so we're going to touch upon 3 different subjects, and we're going to have 3 different people speak, starting with Dan once the lights up, and he's going to talk a little about the history. I'll talk about a little bit of the background, and then Rich will talk about the Rotary Trail program. We might need to turn off the lights so everyone can see this. I realize it's 8:30, so if your neighbor starts snoring, please provide a gentle elbow to keep them.
Not while I'm talking, you know.
Especially when Dan's talking. So Dan will start it off, and then we'll switch over and different people talking. And Dan.
Okay. Yeah. So what staff wanted to do tonight was sort of set the context of really what the city has been doing for maybe close to 20 years in developing our trail system. And this, I don't need it, I'll just talk forever extemporaneously. Back in the early 2000s, the city received a grant through the National Park Service to develop a trail system, not just through the city, but through the entire urban growth boundary. This brochure, of which you've got a copy in front of you, was the product of that system, of that planning program. This was all done before I got here, so I don't know really to the extent, but my understanding is that it was quite a public process that involved a large number of meetings and discussions to try to come up with a vision of the trails, of a trail system in the city. This sort of artist rendering was actually then, I don't want to use the word codified, but in 2004, when the city adopted our current Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that plan included what here is called the Stayton Dream Trails map, that includes on-road trails, off-road trails, an interconnecting system connecting our parks and providing opportunities. And at the same time, at the same year, the transportation system plan included essentially the same map as the non-motorized trails plan. Since that time, when development has occurred that would include in the land on which a future trail is shown, we have required, the city has required that the developer set aside space for that trail and build the portion of the trail that is on the property being developed. That has resulted in paved, non-motorized trails being built in the Sylvan Springs and Santiam Station areas on the east side of Cascade Highway. A section of trail built now, I guess about 2 years ago, in the new Wildlife Meadows subdivision. Those are probably the two most recent, etc. So, so I guess that's really my brief description of the history of trails planning. The Parks Master Plan, Parks and Recreation Master Plan, includes a significant discussion in it of trails and standards for trails and trail width, and sort of a linear park system is envisioned in the adopted Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Dan, go ahead and go forward. So In 2015, we did a community survey. Attached is the results of the survey, and I have put in red kind of the key components. But we asked the question, if city were to fund and or provide city resources on a project, which of the following would you like to see accomplished? Select up to 3. And what was really striking to us was, actually not surprising, but was striking was that the walking trails scored so high, and over 50% of the respondents had listed that. And then a fitness trail, which is basically a hiking trail that along the way would have places to do push-ups, pull-ups, other such activities, also scored in the 15%. So based off of this survey, the city began sort of what I would say was a passive, opportunistic, looking for ways to identify our trail program and opportunities that we could find to grow and enhance our trails program with the idea of eventually building it out. The amount of the proposed trails program is pretty significant, but we've sought easements and talked to property owners in attempts to find areas to continue to make progress to make the trails possible. And I say this wasn't surprising to us. One of the things that staff had talked about, and I can say from my personal experience attending trainings that I go to, that one of the big focuses for enhancement of communities is to look for ways to provide a quality of life. So we talk a lot about infrastructure, whether it's stormwater, wastewater, water, streets, and public safety. But one of the things that we talked about a lot is trails. And so what's been highlighted and what we've seen, and we've provided a document in the packet from the National Park Service that has a listing of these, but also has the resources of where these are coming from. The benefits of trails and greenways are significant, whether it be recreation, transportation, healthy living, economics and property appreciation, environment, and safe and livable communities. So the packet highlights quite a few of those. Dan's going to advance, and we're going to talk about a little bit of them right here. What they found is that trails and greenways increase livability. They provide affordable form of exercise for communities. They provide non-motorized transportation corridors so people can walk or bike to get to other community resources. Increased physical activity. What research has shown over and over again, and the data shows, is that houses near trails and walking paths have an increased value of 1 to 6.5%. So property values near trails are considered desirable. What the data also shows, and Rich can talk about this a little more if we'd like, is that generally that trails reduce crime and illegal activity because of the activity of people on them. As Rich likes to say, the best way to prevent crime is having people in areas and the public. And that also allows for you to have social interactions with your neighbors. So I would advise you to look. We provided the data and the information with that. So I think Rich is going to talk about the next component. I am a Rotarian. I know Rich is a Rotarian. As we've been looking for opportunities to grow the program, Rotary wanted to do a community service project, and this became what was involved. And Rich has taken the point on this, and so Rich, I will let you talk about the partnership with Rotary, the city, and NORPAC and our mission.
So in 2017, several Rotarians, along with myself, many of whom are in the audience tonight, decided that we wanted to take on a project to that we could call the Rotary Project, that we continually work on to improve the community and to just make it a better place to live. And so we opted to take on the trail system, since we knew there were several sections of the trail that had not been previously built out when housing developments had gone in. So we wanted to try to see if we couldn't get those taken care of and just to work to complete the trail system. So we came together and we met with several other organizations. We met with and businesses, Stayton Road Runners, Boy Scouts, NORPAC, Emery & Sons, Home 2, what was Home 2 Construction, building which is a large building or bridge building company, and we partnered to build out the section of trail that goes from Evergreen to Larch, running along the Salem Ditch, which is about a half-mile section of trail. And then as it got out toward Larch, it would take a bridge across and come back onto Washington Street. So do you want to? Here's what before we started the project. This was quite a bit of this was brush and undergrowth that really should be taken out, blackberries and things like that. And we went through and we cleared that out and started the trail system. And this trail will run along this creek out to Washington. It'll be a chip based pathway. We would love to have it be a concrete or a rock path, but for now, with fundraising efforts, it's going to be chip. There we are doing the chipping of the brush. We've worked out there for the last, actually since the last fall, 5 different Saturdays. Numerous Rotarians and some different community members. Councilor Quigley came out and helped for several days of those chipping and getting ready to put down the base for the trail itself. As has been noted at the previous council meetings, somebody came and had some concerns. They had some concerns about the trail running across their backyard or through their backyard, and then they also had concerns with crime. As stated earlier, crime usually tends to drop when you put in trail systems like this that are used by the general population, general public, because criminal activity, those people that are involved in that usually don't like to be around people that are not doing crimes because they like to be where they're not going to be seen. And so if those types of places are being used, then the crime usually drops. And we're just to end it, we're excited about this partnership and want to make sure that it continues.
So we wanted to give a background and some information about the history of the Trails program. We wanted to talk about what had driven staff to be aggressive in looking for that, and then what the partnership was going on with Rotary. So we provided this for an informational, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the Trails program, the survey, or even I think what's in the future for the Trails program.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
First off, I think that's a great program, and I'm a Rotarian too, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's great that they're partnering with the city. I have a question about parks funding, and like when we normally do things for like ADA access, is there anything that we can pull from for funding to make these trails ADA accessible? Because chips are great and they're better than nothing. But having them paved and ADA accessible would be most ideal, I think.
I know in the past we've gone for ADA. Lance was successful in a grant a few years ago at Pioneer Park for the bridge and the path, that ADA accessible path that led out there. So there are grants available, and I know that ADA is becoming more of a focus from not only the city but from Marion County as well, in making the city ADA accessible in terms of walking paths and also just sidewalks and other areas. So as resources become available or as priorities can, I mean, this is a budgeting question of where we want to spend our resources, but grants are always available for information like this, especially if we can justify a need or a community want.
Yeah, I just think of some of the streets that we probably won't be able to make them, ADA accessible for a variety of reasons anytime in the near future. And so I'm just thinking if there's, new walking paths going in that can maybe substitute for that, where people can still get around. And
Well, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this with Lance, but on Friday I talked to the Marion County Public Works Director who does want to reach out and work on a partnership for ADA accessible ramps. So I think it is something we'll be seeing coming forward, and something it's nice to see Marion County wanting to be a partner in that kind of thing. And so I'm springing this on Lance in this public meeting, but I mean, I think it is something that's going to be a future discussion item.
This is really cool. Thank you for sharing all this stuff. It's really neat.
The other thing for grants is the state Parks and Recreation Department is at the tail end of the process of adopting a new statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan known as SCORP. That recognizes the need for additional urban non-motorized trails, and I expect that in the coming years there will be additional grant money out there for the city to apply for to further develop our trail system, which could mean a different surface on this type of trail or expanding it even further.
I'm glad that you guys are always on the lookout. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Keith, me first tonight on this one. The trail, the west terminus of it is where the Salem Ditch crosses Washington Street, right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
That sound right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There'll be a bridge.
Okay, some kind of a footbridge across there?
Correct. There'll be a bridge that'll cross right up behind the properties on Larch, at Larch, and it'll cross the Salem Ditch and come out on Washington Street.
Okay, so we're not going to run that trail south against the back of Larch Street?
That is a potential for future, but for right now, we want to go across to Washington.
That would probably alleviate the concerns of those Larch Street residents that have been kind of vocal, and maybe rightly so, about their neighborhood being impacted by this. Okay, thank you. Jordan? Ms. Ort?
Are these trails something that we do or can market as a reason to come to Stayton?
I think ultimately that's the long-term goal, and this is why something like what Rotary is doing is positive, especially when you're looking at future grants to show a commitment, to show community involvement is always a benefit when you're going for grants. I didn't want to get into too many details, but we have been passively opportunistic in trying to seek out other places to get easements and grants to try to get right-of-ways so that we can continue to expand the trail and to have right-of-ways. Even if we don't have the resources now, then in the future we could build out and continue to build out the trails. So we continue to be on the lookout for land opportunities out in the community that would provide us the ability in the future to continue to grow and expand. And what we've talked about internally is just to try to keep making progress, to slowly continue to build out the program and hopefully get momentum as we're able to continue to build and expand, and as people, I think, have more buy-in and see more value in those kind of projects. But the community, at least in 2015, seemed pretty strongly to support the idea of trails.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay.
So with the concern of homeowners and the trails behind their house or near their house, how are other trails, how does this work with other trails in the community that are near, or that people are, potential strangers are walking around near other houses? How are they impacted?
I won't say there hasn't been issues. We've had a few small minor issues here and there. Occasionally somebody will graffiti the back of somebody's fence, or they will cause a problem back there where we call for a suspicious person hanging out on the trail. But for the most part, we don't have a problem with the trails. The trails are pretty free and clear of the people that are causing problems.
And then I have a follow-up.
Yeah, there are trails in other neighborhoods that abut homes, and
There's a lot of them, actually. Down in the Sylvan Springs area, there's trails that run behind those homes. There's trails behind the wildlife meadows. There's trails, actually, they're not behind other residents, but the trails out in the parks.
And then a follow-up to that. So there's the neighbors on Larch Street that are having concerns about it. And I believe you said that we were working on some ways to address those issues. Can we talk about that?
Originally, the trail was going to go behind their properties and come back on Ida Street, and that was before we didn't know how we were going to raise the funds as from Rotary about putting the bridge across, but a bridge has been since donated. And so we were able to put the bridge across, and so the option is still there. It's a nice option to have the trail branch off and go down over to Ida Street as another branch of the trail, but by having the bridge across, we don't necessarily have to do that at this time.
So is this letter a moot point at the moment? The concerns?
Yes, yes.
At this point? Okay.
At this point.
Okay. Anything else on that? Well, let's go on then to, let's see, resolution, new business, yeah. Now, Resolution 985, amending Resolution 984 to conform to requirements under the city charter. And Mr. Parks isn't here tonight, so Keith,
yeah, this will be on me.
Carrying the load here.
Welcome to some esoteric bond resolutions. The bond authority noticed an error in the previous consideration of Resolution 984. And so what this resolution is before you is to address their specific language so that they are comfortable with the resolution and to fix that. So the memo sort of details what we're asking here, and basically this amendment is to amending specific resolution to say, now therefore the city of Stayton resolves as per their noted error. So we're asking to fix that at their request so that we can finance the detention facility. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Keith, here's one. Who did this before? If before you were designated or the city manager was designated to be able to do this, where'd that come from?
It depends on purchasing authority, and this is a value that is high enough that this is a decision of the city council. So
okay,
that's why this is coming before you, and they're very specific on the language that they want, and noticed a mistake that they had. So
okay.
When I talk about esoteric, I do sort of mean esoteric, right. But that's where we're at.
I thought I knew the answer to that. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
It's not the first time it's been a housekeeping item. It's come before us in the past. So with that said, I'll offer a motion to approve resolution number 985.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve Resolution 985, and is there a motion and a second? Is there any discussion?
Is it 985 or?
It's 985, correct?
985, yeah.
It's addressing 984.
Yep.
So,
I got it.
I just wanted to make sure I was correct.
You are.
And I think I even had it right. Let's just go to a voice vote on this, unless, do we need a, you need to poll council on this one? No? I'm getting a negative shake of the head. Let's just go to a voice vote. All in favor of approving of Resolution 985, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we'll declare the motion passed 5-0 and move along. Economic Development Strategies Project. Mr. Fleischman.
Good, thank you. In the fall, or early winter perhaps, when the previous city council approved our entering into a contract with Bridge Economic Development, it requested that staff keep council informed in the progress of the project. So I've just got a quick note to let you know they've been The consultant team's been busy gathering background information. They've got a lot of stuff put together on employment and employment opportunities here in the city, employment by industry of residents of the city, things like that. We have formed a public advisory committee to sort of guide the process. Today, we started a series of roundtable discussions. You all received an invitation to one happening tomorrow afternoon. This morning's focused on public works issues. This afternoon's the invitees were commercial real estate brokers and businesses and property owners in our industrial zone. Tomorrow's the Public Advisory Committee. Second meeting is our economic development partners such as SEDCOR, the Council of Governments, the Small Business Development Center at the Community College, Chamber of Commerce, and then community leaders. These are really listening sessions. There's a little bit of information presented, but just to say, hey, what's going on? What are the issues? Things like that, and then we'll have additional community gatherings to talk about what do we want to see happen and what do we need to do to get there. So just a quick status update of where we are on that project.
Okay, thank you. And that meeting's tomorrow afternoon at 2:30? What did I hear?
I
read it somewhere.
Right, yes. I believe that may be right, but I've got 3 of them scheduled, and I can't remember what times which ones are without looking at my calendar.
Check that out if you can be there tomorrow. Okay, thank you, Dan.
I have the Economic Development Partners.
It's at 1:30.
I'm sorry?
11:30?
11:30 is Economic Development Partners, 1:30 is community folks that were invited.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So that's the one I need to go to. Let's see. Staff, commission reports, none. Presentation, comments from the public.
Did you want to go through this?
Another session of this? Oh.
Who just said none?
No, it's coming.
Oh, it's coming. Oh, okay.
It's a
staff commission reports.
What are we?
Comments from the public. Comments from the public.
Well, that's what I was doing.
That's for a keep thing after.
Oh.
One more time for comments from the public.
Oh, you just want to go there.
Other comments from the public, anything? As we display our keen organizational ability.
Okay.
I take no credit for this, and most of the blame. Monthly department reports.
This is from the city manager.
This is from the city manager, Mayor, is that correct?
I guess.
Correct.
Yeah, all right. So thank you for your patience. We're going to turn off the lights. Same rule applies. If someone starts to nod off, just a gentle nudge would be great. A change that we are proposing and have for you tonight is something we've been working on. This is part of a larger group of projects in terms of being more transparent and providing information in an easy, accessible place online. In the agenda, you'll see a link. We will be publicizing this as well, where we are now putting our monthly departmental reports for all departments. And so on this link, you'll see tabs towards the center of each department, and then below that, a link of all the reports. So in the past, the reports were provided in the second meeting of every month, and we went over them. The idea here is to provide all of the information in a public and accessible way, and for the reports to be easily viewed and seen, and for past reports to be looked at as well.